Hello everyone, I hope you all are doing well. This is lesson 4, Boolean Expressions and If Statements. In this lesson, we will be going over different operator comparisons. Check to see if a number is even or odd using the modulus operator, using if statements, if-else statements, and if-else-if statements. We will be playing with and, or, and not operators. We will talk about De Morgan's law, and last but not least, we will also mention the dot equals method for the string. I mentioned the dot equals method for the string in the previous lesson, but I'll go more in depth into this lesson. So, before we get started, we want to open our BlueJ package. I just went into my folder and clicked on package, and it just opened up over here. We're going to want to create a new class. I'm just going to name it lesson 4 because that is what we are doing right now. So I'm going to open the editor. We're going to highlight everything and delete. And we just want to type in public class lesson underscore 4. Oops, I misspelled class up there. Let's fix that. And then we're going to want to add in our main method, public static void main string args. So everything we do will take place within this main method. So the first thing I want to talk to you about before we get started in this whole Boolean expressions and if statements is the primitive type Boolean. So a Boolean variable stores everything that is either true or false. So a Boolean variable, again, is either true or it is false. So we will just be playing with these Boolean expressions in this lesson. So every statement that we do will either return the value true or false. We can either store it in this variable, and then we can also print them out to see if everything is working properly. So let's first talk about the equals operator. So how do you check if any two integers or doubles, variables, or strings are equal? Well, we can say, let's just say we have two integers. So I'll just name this int num1 and int num2 equals 2. So how do we check if whatever the value in num is equal to the value in num2? Well, that's where the equals operator comes into play. Now, one thing you need to recognize, I've consistently mentioned that this equal sign is an assignment operator. Num is set to the value of 1. Wait, but if we're already using this equal sign as an assignment function, then how do we check if two are equal? We can't just do Boolean, let's do check equals num equals num2. That won't work. How can we possibly check if these two variables are equal? Well, when we are checking when two variables are equal, or any two things, then we do the double equals. So to understand the difference, again, between the single equal sign and the double equal signs is that the single equal sign is an assignment operator. It means that num is being set to the value of 1. This is not setting num to the value of whatever's in num2, because essentially if we just had one equal sign, it would just be the same thing as saying num is now equal to the value of num2. We are assigning the value of num2 to the variable num. The double equal sign, on the other hand, returns a Boolean statement, a Boolean value, either true or false. It is going to return if num, whatever the value in num, is equal to the value of num2. So I hope you guys now understand the difference between the single equal signs and the double equal sign. All right, so now this should compile. So what is going to be stored within this variable is either a true or a false. Whether num is equal to num2, then it'll return true, and if num is not equal to num2, then it should return false. So here, let's check it out. I'm just going to print out the values so that we as a user can see the value of whatever is inside. Check. Just going to want to print out whatever the variable check over here. We're going to run our main method and false. So essentially what this has told us is that num is not equal to num2. Say we make both of the values 2. Let's see what it'll return now. It's going to return the value of true. So now we know that num is equal to num2. All right, so I hope you guys have understood how it works. Now, this can also work with doubles. Double, num, and double. So we'll try it out again with like 2.6 and 2.5. That should return a value of false since both of those numbers are not equal. False. Here we go. And if we make both of the variables equal to 2.5, then we should get a value of true. Here we go. So, all right, if this works for doubles and integers, it should also work for strings, right? Let's try it out. String, I'm just going to name this string str equals hi. String str2 equals hi, right? This should actually end up returning true, right? Because since the value of whatever's in str is equal to str2. Let's give it a try. Str equals str2. Let's see if we're right. Here we go. That should work as well, because these are primitive types. So then if it works for any variable, then it should work with an object. All right, we have our date class down here again. Let's create an object of the date class. Date d1 equals new date. Okay, and date d2 equals new date. All right, so we just made we did everything is the same, right? Everything should be the same. We created new dates. They should be the same object, right? Because we use the same constructor for everyone. Let's give it a try and see if they're equal. And again, this arrow is coming because now we're using the date class. So let's just print it out, see what happens. False. Now you may be wondering, why does it return false? For strings, integers, and doubles, it returned true. Why does it return false when we do with objects? Remember in the last lesson how I told you, there are two types of variables in Java. Primitive variables and object variables. Primitive variables, the value, whatever is stored within them, is so small that the value can be stored within that variable. Objects, it's a different story. The object, again, holds directions or reference to the object because it doesn't have enough space in this place over here to store it. So all it can store within this variable is just the address to get to the object. So the address to get to this object is of course going to be different from the address to get to this object because they both are two separate objects. Now if you didn't understand what that means, imagine it this way. You have directions to box A and directions to box B. Box A stands as the object D1, box B stands as the object of D2. Even though these are two separate objects, they contain the same information within those boxes. Those boxes contain the same files, the same papers. Box A contains the same files, box B contains the same files. That's essentially what we've done over here. We've created one object and a second object. This object contains the same values as whatever's in this object. But the directions to get to box A are of course going to be different than the directions to get to box B. So that is why we cannot say D1 equals D2. Here, I'll show it to you. So let's comment this out for now. And let me just show you. So if we try to print out D1, we're going to end up actually getting the memory address for it. See, this is useless to us. This only can be understood by Java. And let me show you for D2. It's going to be a separate memory address because, again, remember the box analogy that I told you of? They both exist in two different places. Box A cannot physically exist in the same place that box B does. They both are in two separate positions. Therefore, they're going to be different directions to get to them. So here we go. Let's print it out, and there you go. This memory address is different from this memory address. So that's why it returned false. It compared this with this. Now, to get objects to equal, then within the class, there usually has to be an equals method. So say I had a separate method, public Boolean equals date D1. Essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to have the same thing. So we have year equals D1 dot get year, day equals day dot get day. And if you're not understanding this, we'll go over all of this in the class, in the class lesson. So if here, oh wait, I'll go over this later when we get into the if statements. For now, I'm just gonna write implementation not shown. So essentially, and I'll just say return false just so that it doesn't throw me an error. Okay, so the way how it works is usually there is going to be a dot equals method within the class that you're using, and that dot equals method should return a value of true or false for it. So it works the same way as in strings, equals. There you go. It works something like that. So, but D1 can equal D2. It is possible for this to return true. The way how is if both of these variables hold the directions to the same object. So if D2 holds the directions to if D1 holds the directions to this object, then D2 also needs to hold the directions to this object. Well, we can't just create a new object because that'll just create a new box like we had said. So the way to do it is we just set it to D1. So whatever the memory address in D1 is, it's going to be saved into D2. Now this should return true. Let's print out whatever is in check. Check. Okay. Oops. Here we go. True. There you go. And the reason for that, again, is here. We're going to try it out. ln. Print out both of the memory addresses for you. So we'll print out the memory address for D1. And we'll print out the memory address for D2. They should both be the same. There you go. They're both the same. The reason for that is because, again, they're pointing to the same object. All right. And then there's also a different way how to do this. So let's go back to just simple integers. Integer num1 equals 5 and int num2 equals 6. There's also a way we can check the num1 is greater than num2. If num1 is greater than num2, that works. So let's see, 5 is greater than 6. This should actually return false, since 5 obviously isn't greater than 6. There you go. And say if we just bumped up this value to 70 or something, then it should return true, because whatever is stored within num1 is obviously greater than num2. Same thing works with less than. 70, of course, is not less than 6. And this can work for doubles as well. Now, I mentioned within strings, there was a way to check if a string comes before another string using the compare to method. So all we'd have to do is just do str1.compare2 in parentheses, put str2 and see if it's greater than 0, less than 0, or equal to 0. If you forgot about the compare to method, please go back and check in the previous lesson. I have explained it up real nice for you there. So let's clear this out. And there's one last thing we need to talk about. All right, if we're able to check if anything is less than or greater than, we should also be able to check in if less than or equal to or greater than equal to. Well, I don't see a less than equal to sign anywhere on my keyboard, and I don't see a greater than equal to sign anywhere on my keyboard. So the way how we do it in Java is we do less than, and then you just put an equal sign over there. That will check if num1 is less than or equal to num2. Same thing works for greater than. You just put a greater than sign, and then you put equals. So then we can check if num1 is greater than or equal to num2. So if you make this 6, it should end up returning true. All right. Now we can check if num1 equals num2, correct? Well, is there a way to check if num1 is not equal to num2? There in fact is. It's the exclamation point, then equals. This basically checks if num1 is not equal to num2, then it will return true. If num1 is equal to num2, then it'll return false. It's basically the opposite. So this should, in fact, return false, because 6 is equal to 6. But if we make these different values, then we should get a value of true, right? And there's another way. So what if we have equals? Then we can just put a not around the entire parentheses. So it'll get the value of whatever's here, and then it'll make it the opposite of what was inside this. So if both of these values are 6, then we check if num1 is equal to num2. They're both equal to 6, so it should return true. But then we have this not, so it'll make it whatever the opposite in this was returned, so it'll make it false. Here, let's give it a try. False. And if we make these different values, let's go through the steps again. Num1 equals num2. Num1 obviously does not equal num2 because 6 obviously does not equal 7. So this will return false. But if we put the not sign on it, it'll return the opposite of whatever is returned. So the opposite of false is true. So it should return true. And there it is, true. Okay. So now that we've gone over the not operator, you can put this not operator anywhere you want. You can put it over parentheses, you can put it over here and within this equal sign. It's completely customizable. So now the next part in our lesson is determining whether a number is even or odd. So we want to check if num1, let's just name this num, is even or is it odd. So let's see. Num, remember the modulus operator? We get a remainder. So think about it this way. All even numbers are greater than 0. So we just have to do num. Hold on, sorry, I'm confusing myself. all even numbers are divisible by 2, correct? So if all even numbers are divisible by 2, then they should have no remainder when divided by 2. If all of them are divisible by 2, then we should get a remainder of 0. Remember the modulus operator? We were able to get the remainder of certain numbers. So if num divided by 2, what is the remainder of num divided by 2? So what is the remainder of 6 divided by 2? Well, 6 divides into 2 evenly with 3, and there is no remainder, so equals 0. And it works the same essentially for any even number. So what if we make this 8? 8 divided by 2 is 4, no remainders. 10 divided by 2 is 5, no remainders. 7 divided by 2 is 3, and then we get a remainder of 1. So this condition would not be met. So in that case, we get false. So what this will be checking, if this ends up being equal to 0, then the number is even and it will return true. If the number is odd, this will return false. So this should return false, right? Because 7 is odd. There you go. And let's just throw in any even number, 10 or something. And it should return true. All right. And then we can do it the opposite way as well. We can utilize the not equals to thing and see, all right, if num divided by 2 is not equal to 0, then it's going to be odd. So if the num is odd, then this will return true. And if num is even, it will return false. Here, let's give it a try. It should return false because 10 is even. In other words, not odd. There you go. And say we just throw in an odd number over there. Should return true. All right, so that's all about determining if anything is even or odd. So next thing we need to talk about is if statements. All right, so we're going to name this int num1, int num2 equals 10. All right, so we don't need this anymore. And I don't need this print statement anymore either. So let's see. Okay. If num1 is equal to num2, I want to return what I want to print out the variable true, but if num1 is not equal to num2, I want to do false. So we can use the if statement. I mentioned before we could just do system.out.println and put in here num1 equals num2. That is the more efficient way, but for our purposes, I'm going to show it to you in another way in which you can utilize if statements. So if num1, again we use our double equals, then I want to print out, here, let's print out just the string version of true. And else, here, not to confuse yourself with Boolean, I'll just put like hi or something. And then if num else, getting ahead of myself there. So println, and then regardless of what happens, I want to print, println, hey. So essentially what this will do is we'll run our main method, right? So we'll initialize num1, declare and initialize num2, and then we get to our if statement. All right. It's essentially the same way how it looks. If the value of num1 equals num2, so if whatever is within here returns true. If whatever is within here is false, then this entire thing will not run. But if whatever in this is true, then it will run whatever is within this if statement. And regardless of what happens within this if statement, this will always run because it does not exist within our if statement. So num1 and num2. 11 equals to 2. That will return false. So so it will not run whatever's within here, and it'll just end up printing out this. So we should just get the value of hey printed out to us. Hey, all right. And what if both of these values are true? So whatever's within this is true. Well, then it'll run everything through here, so it'll print out hi. After it executes the if statement, it'll again go back to our main method and print out hey. So it should print out hi, hey, both in line. Hi, hey, like I said. So that's essentially how if statements work. Pretty self-explanatory. If whatever is within this is true, it'll run. If whatever is within this is false, then this will not run. So now let's talk about if-else statements. Else. So if whatever runs in this, if this is true, then it will return this, and it will go outside of this. But if num1 is, hold on, give me a second. System not out, print ln. All right. If num1 is not equal to num2, then this will return false, right? And remember that this entire thing ceased. But else, if this statement ends up being false, then it will return whatever is inside this. But if this is whatever is inside of this is true, then this will run. So it's basically one of these statements is going to have to run in either case. So something is going to run. It's not going to be like previously where this runs only if this thing happens and nothing else. So if 10 equals to 10, it should just print out hi, hey, like previously before. Hi, hey. But if both of these numbers are not equal, then this will not run, but it'll just go down to the second statement because, like I said, one of these statements has to run. I'll print out h, hey, because this statement ran, and then this runs regardless. So that's essentially how if-else statements work. Then there's if, else if. So let's just say if num1 is even. Remember that from before? Then I'll print out h. So essentially how this works. This is just an extended if off of this. So if this ends up being true, then we're going to print out hi, and this entire statement, and this entire thing will be done, and it'll just print out hey. If this is not equal to num2, then we're going to go down to this statement, but it's not like this. It's not like this case is going to run anytime this statement becomes false. Then it's going to check whatever's in this. If the num1 is even, then it will print out h. But if it is not equal to num2, and if it goes over here and checks that num1 is not even, then nothing will happen, and it'll just print out hey. So in this case, hold on, let's clear out our terminal. If 10 equals 11, that's false. All right, let's go down to our second statement. If num1 is even, so 10, of course that's even. So it's going to end up printing out h and then hey. Because hey prints regardless of what happens. All right. So let's just say num1 is not even. It's also odd. So what's going to happen? 5 is not equal to 11. That's going to return false. Then it's going to check if 5 is even. 5, of course, is not even. So nothing will happen. We'll just print out hey. Let's get this cleared out. There we go. Hey. But, okay, what if both of these values are true? So num1 equals true. So if this returns true, we get out of all of this, and we just go to and print out hey. So it should print out hi, hey. Hi, hey. Pretty simple. Now, next thing we need to talk about is, all right, we can have as many else ifs as we want. We can keep going or do whatever. And then we can also put in an else in there. So else, like that. And let's just say it prints out like T. T. So what this should do, so if num1 equals num2, then 5 is equal to 5. That'll return true, so all we'll print out is just hi, and then hey, of course, down at the bottom, like we have seen up there. But let's see if both of these cases end up being false, what happens. So let's make this back to 11. It goes through, 11 is not equal to 5, this statement doesn't run, we go down here. If num1 is even, 11 is not even, so this is false, then it prints this. So this is like your default case scenario. If this and this all return false, then we return this. So it's not like previously. Whenever we add else, something is going to be printed. One of these three statements is always going to be printed. It's not like going to be like previously when we only had if and else if. It's either if this statement runs or doesn't. One of these cases is always going to run. So this should actually end up printing out T hey. T hey, like I had mentioned. And else only runs in the case that if this and this are false. Like this is the default last case scenario. But if any one of these are true, then it'll just print out whatever it is depending on the order. Okay, we've talked about if and else if statements. Now we need to talk about one more thing. So what if num1 equals num2 and num has to be an even number? So we can do this. So we can check. So in an and, it's essentially how it has to be. So this is the and operator. Num1 has to equal num2. This statement has to be true, and this statement has to be true in order for the if statement to run. If any one of these cases is false, then it's going to be false. So let's just put it down here. If true equals true, and we also want to check if true equals false. What is this going to return? So let's walk through it. So true equals true. Of course, true equals true. And then we have to check and, so false. So essentially a simplified version of this is we're checking, is this true? Yes, it is. But is this statement true? No, it's false. So since both of these statements are not true, we're going to get out the value false. Right there. But, and it's similar thing over here. If this statement returns true and this statement returns true, then whatever is inside this entire statement is true. But if any one of these cases becomes false, then it's going to make the entire statement false because both conditions have to be true. Okay, let's just make this even and let's make it 10. So this will of course return true because num1 is equal to true. Num1%, and this is also an even number. So it should end up just printing out high. There we go. But what if we have 11 and 11? So num1 is equal to num2. All right, that's true. Num1 is even. So num1 is actually odd, so this will end up returning false because both of these statements are not true it's going to be false, so this is not going to run, so we're not going to get anything. So here, I'll show it to you. So we get nothing printed out because this condition was not met, so we can't run this. So that's essentially how the AND works. So we also have ORs. That's how we do OR. So essentially how OR works is true equals true. I'll bring up the same thing. Or true equals false. So essentially in OR, only one of these conditions has to be true because it's either this can be true or this can be true. It'll return true if either one of these cases are true. The only case when this will return false, if both of these conditions are false, that's the only time it'll return false. But even if one of these becomes true, then it's going to return true. So let's walk through this. True equals true. That's true. True equals false. That's false. True or false. So we have one of the statements is true, so this should end up returning true. Because remember, the rule for ORs is one of the conditions can be true to make the entire thing true. So true. So here, let's get this out. So the same thing again works up here. So let's go through it over here. So let's just say this is 10. So num1 equals num2. Okay, this is false. We know that. So is num1 even? Num1 is even, so this is true. So out of both of these conditions, one of them is true. So that means this entire thing is true. Since the statement is true, whatever is within this if statement is going to run. So we're going to print out hi. Hi. There we go. Let's say both of these cases are false. Then, let's see. We'll make this 7. It's not going to return anything because this entire statement was false. Let's walk through it. Num1 equals num2. 7 does not equal 11. Num1 is even. 7 is not even. Since both of these conditions are false, it will not print whatever, it will not run whatever's within this if statement. Let's say both of these are true. Let's make these both 10 again. Then it will run whatever's in the if statement. The reason for that, num1 is equal to num2, 10 equals 10, that's true. And num1 is even, so 10 is even, so it's true. Since at least one of the statements is true, this entire thing will be true. Since this entire thing is true, we're going to print whatever, we're going to run whatever's in the if statement. All right. Hopefully that made you explain what and ORs work. And then, of course, we talked about the not operator. One more thing we need to talk about is De Morgan's law. So we don't need any of this anymore. So system, here, let's go back to our Boolean check. And we're going to print out whatever's within check. So check. So this has only been declared. So println. Here, I'll go over one more thing with you guys. So remember this. Check has not been initialized. So we cannot print because check does not have a value right now. So that's why it's throwing us the error. In order for check to get a value, we can either do it up here, up there, we can either put in equals, or we can just do check equals, we'll just initialize it down here to something like true. Now it won't throw an error. All right, now back to De Morgan's law. So let's see, we have two Boolean variables. We'll name this A, and we'll name another one B. False. So check here. I don't usually like doing that. I usually like making everything clean and concise. So not A and B. What is this going to print? Oops. Let's go through it together. So A is true. Okay? And so since we have an and, both A and B have to be true. So A is true. Okay, we're all good right now. B is false. Okay. Since both of these conditions are not true, this entire thing is going to be false, whatever's in the parentheses. But since we have the not operator, we're going to make it the opposite of whatever's in here. So the opposite of false is true, so it should print out the value true. Right there. Okay. Now, I'm going to mention one more thing. So we have this. So Boolean check 2. Let's see here. We're going to print that out as well. I'm just going to copy paste it. Check 2. All right. And not A or not B. Let's go through this together as well. Not A. So what is not A? So it's the same thing as order of operations. We will always do parentheses first. Then the next of precedence comes not. After not, we do and or. It's like your PEMDAS. First comes parentheses, second comes the not operator, third comes the and last comes the or. So let's see. So not A. That's the opposite of true is false. Okay. Remember, since it's an or, we only need one of these conditions to be true. All right. So the opposite of false for B, which is true. So since one of these statements is true, check 2 should return true. And remember, check this first one also return true. Both of them return true. So this is De Morgan's law. Not A and B in parentheses is equal to not A or not B. So it's like the distributive property. So let's take the not. So not to A, not A. Okay, that makes sense. But a unique thing about Java is the not is also going to go to the and. That's how I like to think about it. So the opposite of and, I like to think about it as or. So the not gets distributed to every one of these. So not A, and that is going to get changed to an or, and not B. That's De Morgan's law. Same thing works the opposite way. If we make this or, then it's going to be and. The reason for that, not A, we have to make this the opposite as well, so it's going to be and then not B, right over there. So both of these statements will always be true. So that's De Morgan's law. And the last thing we need to talk about in this lesson before we can call it a day is the dot equals. And I mentioned it in the previous lesson, but I'm just going to mention it again in this lesson. So we have our string str1 equals hi, and string str2 equals hey. All right, so we bring back our if statements. str1 dot equals str2. This is how we compare strings. We don't usually do it with the equal sign. We usually like to do it with the dot equals method. All right, so essentially all this method does is check if str1 equals str2. So this is a method, this entire statement, if this entire statement is true, we're going to print out true. And if whatever's within this is false, we're not going to print out anything. So is hi equal to hey? Of course not. So we should just get blank. Nothing's going to be printed out because nothing's going to run. But if we set both of these to hi, then it's going to print out true. The reason for that, str1 dot equals str2. That entire statement's true. So since this entire thing is true, we're going to run whatever's in the if statement. All right, that's all for today's lesson. Thank you for listening. And again, if you didn't understand any of the content in today's lesson, please scroll down to the bottom of this page and you'll find information regarding how to schedule tutoring. And I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.